Good morning. Man, so good to see everyone here this morning. As you guys can see, today we're beginning a brand new series entitled Money Matters. Now, let me kind of explain why I'm beginning this new series about money. A couple of weeks ago, I was sitting down with the elders and we were talking. And of course, I just finished up a series on the family, and the elders said to me, they said, hey, you've been talking about the family, and they said, one of the things that really impacts the family is money and how we handle money. And they said, do you think that you could follow up this series on the family by talking about how to handle money matters within the family? And I said, absolutely. Because I definitely believe this is important. In fact, let me share some things with you may not know. No other issue creates more stress than money. How many of you have ever been stressed out about money matters before? Look around, absolutely. Also, no other issue splits more marriages than money. And this is how it ties into the family. I don't know if you know this or not. 56% of all divorces in America are over financial issues, over money. Also, no other issue motivates more crime than money. No other issue stimulates more sinful behavior than money. And so as you can see, this is an important topic. That's probably why the Bible uses more scripture in dealing with how we use our wealth or how we use money than it does on passages about prayer. This is probably why Jesus taught more on money, on wealth, than He did about heaven and hell combined. Because this is an important matter, as you can see. Especially when it comes to the family. And so that's what we're going to be talking about, Lord willing, over the next couple of weeks. And I will tell you this morning, I am not a financial expert. You're looking at a guy who has made a lot of financial mistakes. But I've been around 41 years. And because of those mistakes, I have learned some things. I've also learned some things through the reading of books and just by the guidance of other people and the counsel that people have shared with me. And so through this series, I'm going to try and share some of those things with you. I don't believe I've ever done a series quite like this because basically I've got just a bunch of thoughts up here and I'm just going to kind of unload those things on you. But I hope these things are going to help today. Let me begin with this question. How many of you have ever heard someone say, man, our marriage was absolutely wonderful when we acquired debt and bills? Think about that just for a minute. How many of you have ever heard someone say, man, we were fussing, we were fighting all the time, we were stressed out until we acquired payments and debt and high interest rate? Anybody ever heard someone say that? Man, life was wonderful when we had debt. But how many of you have heard people say, I want to give to those in need, and I want to help the church, and I want to help, missionaries and so forth, but I'm just not able to. How many of you have heard people say, man, because of our financial situation, me and my spouse, we fight all the time? How many of you have heard people say, man, because of our financial situation, man, we can't sleep at night. I mean, I'm stressed out thinking about it. What if we can't pay this? What if we can't pay that? What if we lose the car? What if we lose the house? How many of you have heard people who have made statements like, man, I hadn't been on vacation in years because we just don't have the finances to be able to do anything like that? You mean to tell you why people say those things? Because how we handle money matters. Imagine what it would be like right now if you were debt-free. Imagine how your life would be different. Imagine, seeing someone in need and going up to that need and going up to that individual and saying, look, I just want to help, or we just want to help because we're able. Imagine having something break around the house and instead of using a credit card or anything like that, just being able to pull out some cash and to pay for those things to be fixed. Maybe it's new tires. Maybe it's your air conditioner's gone out, and instead of paying interest, a lot of interest, and paying, a lot over time, you're able to pay cash for it. Imagine what that would be like. Imagine if a vacation came open for you. Imagine what it would be like to be able to have as the greatest decision that you have to make. It has nothing to do with money, but rather it has everything to do with where you're going to go and what you're going to do. That's your greatest problem. Am I going to go to the mountains? Am I going to go to the beach? Am I going to take a cruise? Because money's not an option. You're able to pay for it. Imagine what that would be like. How many of you are interested in that? I would hope that all of us would say, oh, me. Thank you. I appreciate it, Robert. I need somebody talking to me today, so you're going to have to talk. Everybody else is, I don't know if they're just wrapped up in the moment or what, so you're going to have to talk to me today, Robert. We all want that, right? But it's going to take work. In fact, I want to share with you 3 things this morning. First of all, number 1, it's going to take self-control. It's going to take self-control. Now, what does that word self-control mean? Well, if you look it up in the dictionary, self-control is the ability to control oneself. Are you with me? Not to control others. I'm just talking about you. You have to control you. That's what self-control is. In particular, one's emotions and one's what, church? One's desires. How many of you have desires at times? I'm gonna talk to our ladies just for a few minutes. I'm gonna pick on you ladies. And now listen. I'm gonna come to the men, but I'm gonna start with the ladies because statistics show that you ladies buy more. Do you realize that? Now, you buy the small stuff, okay? You buy the nickel and dime stuff. Ladies are very vulnerable, they say, to sales. And so they buy nickel and dime stuff, a bracelet over here, a t-shirt over there, maybe something for the car, something for the home, nickel and dime stuff on sale. And they come home and they try and convince their husband and themselves, look how much money I've saved. Right? But it's nickel and dimes, it's small stuff, but here's the thing, ladies. Over time, nickel and dimes add up, and over time, you can sink the ship. You with me? Now, guys, we're totally different from that. We sink the ship all at once. We come home and we say, honey, guess what? You're going to love this. I just bought a boat. I just bought some jet skis, and by the way, I had to buy a truck to pull the jet skis, and so that's the way we work, men. We sink the ship all at once, and it all has to do with self-control. We have these desires, right? And the problem is, follow me here, we've got deep down inside this two-year-old little child. And you know the child I'm talking about. You've seen them at Walmart when they pass the candy aisle, when they pass the toy aisle. It's Mama, Daddy, I want it. I got to have it. You got to get that for me. I want it. And they're on the floor kicking and screaming, and I've got to have it. We've got that same child in us, adults. And so we've got to practice some self-control. We've got to lock that child away. And we can't let that child out. In fact, I want everyone to say with me the hardest word in the English language. Are you ready for this? No. On the count of 3, I want everyone to say it with me. 1, 2, 3. No. I want you to add something to that, okay? No, I don't need that. 1, 2, 3. No, I don't need that. Very good. You can say it. You can do this. But that's where we have problems, is saying no, practicing self-control. In fact, let me share with you this morning 3 choices that we can make as far as living is concerned. First of all, we can live above our means. And for those of you who are asking, well, what exactly does that mean? It means spending more than you actually make. Now, those of you who are in your 70s and 80s and above, you're scratching your head and you're going, I can't relate to that. That's strange to me. How can anyone spend more than they make? You realize the average American spends 107% of their income. And you say, how is that even possible? Look up here. Credit. Credit cards. Do you realize that the average American has $16,000 of credit card debt? $16,000. I know people who have over $100,000 in credit card debt. I know people who have $30,000 in credit card debt. This is very real. This is just the average American. And the question is, why? Why does that happen? Because people want what they want when they want it. They don't want to practice self-control. They don't want to save. They don't want to put any money back, so that they can pay cash for that. They want it now. They want it when they want it. And so, my income doesn't exceed to that, and so I'm just going to put it on credit card. And so most people spend 107% of their income. Let me share a passage with you. 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 16. This is what John says. He says, do not love the world or anything in the world. He says, if anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, you ready for this? The lust of the flesh, the lust of the what, church? The eyes and the pride of life, it doesn't come from the Father, but it comes from the world. Now, the word I want you to really pay attention to is this word lust right here, because I know many times when we think about the word lust, we think about it from a physical, context, a sexual context. But really, what he's talking about here when he says lust is this. Lust is an unhealthy, intense desire for something. Lust of the eyes. How many of us have seen something, maybe a neighbor, maybe it's a coworker, and man, we see it and we want it. Man, I gotta have it. They've got something that I don't have, and if we didn't know that they had it, we wouldn't know that we were missing it, right? But we see it, and man, I gotta have it. I just can't do without it. And we give in. And we say, I gotta have it, and we buy it, or we charge it, or we take out a loan for it, and when we live like that, catastrophe is bound to catch up with us. And I'm talking about financial bankruptcy. Someone once said, and I thought this was really good, someone once said, if your output exceeds your income, and that's what we're talking about, then your upkeep will be your downfall. The average American family is just 6 weeks away from bankruptcy. Why? Because a lot of people are living above their means. They're spending more than they make. There's another way, another choice that we can live, and that is according to our means, which is spending all that we have. Now, we're not spending above that. We're spending everything that we make. I mean, that car, as long as you can show me on paper how I can afford it on a monthly basis, as long as you can show me in buying that TV on credit that I can make those monthly payments, then man, sign me up, buy it, purchase it. I want it. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 20. Solomon says, the wise have wealth and luxury, but the fools spend what, church? Whatever they get. Let me share another passage with you. And this may speak to some of you this morning, may be very eye-opening. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 7 says, the rich rule over the poor, and the what, church? The bar is a what, church? A slave to the what, church? To the lender. Do you realize that? And that's where a lot of people are. They're in financial bondage. They are a slave to the lender because they have spent everything that they have. They can make the payments, but everything is tied up. And they have no leniency, no padding to do anything else. In fact, let me ask you a question this morning. I'm going to give you a pop quiz. And I know you're going, ugh, man, I hate pop quizzes. I don't want you to answer at all. Except to yourself. If there was a critical need in your family, how would you deal with it? If there was some good work at church that came along, what would you do? Could you do anything? You see, it's hard for people in financial bondage to obey God in the area of generosity. Why? Because they're stuck. All their money is tied up. They're not going bankrupt, but everything's tied up to where they can't do anything else. And then lastly, there's another choice, and that is we can live below our means, which means that we live on less than we make. What a concept, right? Which means that we have an opportunity to save, which means we have an opportunity to help those who are in need. We have an opportunity to do other things with the money that God has given us to be stewards over. We have padding. It's kind of an interesting passage in Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 through 8. Now, this particular passage, if you look at it in its context, what Solomon's really dealing with here is laziness. People who don't want to work. But there's also a much deeper thing that we can get from this verse. Notice what it says, go to the ant. He says, look at the ant, you sluggard. He's talking to those who are lazy. Consider its ways and be wise. It is no commander. It has no overseer, no ruler, yet it what, church? It stores its provisions in the summer and it gathers food in the harvest. In other words, okay, look at the ant. Look how hard the ant works. Don't be lazy. But he also tells us that the ant stores. Why? Why does the ant store in the summer? To prepare for the difficulty of the winter when there's nothing. And you think about that from a financial standpoint, when you save, when you put back money during the good times, when the bad time comes, when the winter strikes, you've got something to live on. And you don't have to take out a loan, and you don't have to go to someone and say, hey, can I borrow money? Or you don't have to pull out a credit card and put it on credit. You've got it because you're living on less than what you actually make. And some of you may say, well, how do we do that? I mean, especially when we live in a world which measures success by how much stuff we have. How do we do that living in a world where we're bombarded, they say, with over 300,000 advertisements daily? Whether it's through billboard, the internet, television commercials, radio. I mean, all of these commercials telling us, listen, if you want to be happy, then you need to trade in all your other stuff and buy all this new stuff. How in this world can we live on less living in a world like this? Let me share a philosophy with you. Some of you are going to laugh. You're going to say, man, this is old school. But this is what our family tries to live by. Use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. Write it down. It's a great philosophy. For example, I'll give you an example of how we use this philosophy in our house. You look at our vehicles. Julie drives a 2008 Toyota Sienna, and man, it's not the prettiest vehicle in the world. It's missing paint. It's got stains on the inside. It's got close to 200,000 miles, but you know what? It gets us from point A to point B, and it's paid off. I have a 2007 Nissan Titan. Well, there's not a whole lot I can say about the Titan. It's got some rust. It's got some dents in the fender. My seats are ripped. It's kind of manly though, you know what I'm saying? Got a great Alabama sticker on it. And the question is, could we buy new vehicles? Yeah. We could. And some of you say, well, then why don't you? I mean, why would you want to live that way when you could have better? Because here's what Julie and I discovered is really better, is having two vehicles that aren't the prettiest thing in the world, but yet they are paid off instead of having new vehicles with huge payments and huge interest rate that we're going to be paying over time, which really stresses us out. We've decided that's better for us. Our house. Julie and I have decided, we decided a long time ago that we were not going to live for a house. We had a certain area that we could go, and we were not going to pass that. Houses in Alabama were a lot less expensive. We come to Florida, and for 4 years, man, we've looked at a lot of houses, and we've seen some really nice houses. And at times, man, we've talked about, should we go over this? Should we spend the extra money? But we keep coming back to each other saying, you know what? We said, no, we're not living to live for a house. And we prayed about it, and after 4 years, a couple of months ago, we were able to buy a house. Not the biggest. It's not the best in the neighborhood, 1,900 square feet. But you know what? It's in our price range. And you know what? As a big family doing stuff all the time, we hardly live there anyway. You know what I'm saying? But we waited till we could get what was better, something that was in our price range, so that we didn't get stressed out. Use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. Jesus put it like this, Luke chapter 12, verse 15. He says, take heed and beware of what, church? Covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. Now that word covetousness, if you look it up in Strong's Concordance, it says a strong desire to have something that what? Doesn't belong to you. And again, I think this is how we get in trouble. We look at the neighbors, we look at our co-workers, we see that car drive by that we don't have, but man, it looks so good and we want it so badly that we give in. And it's so bad that not only will our homes many times not be able to hold the stuff that we have, and our garages won't be able to hold all the stuff that we have to start paying for extra buildings to store all the stuff that we have. Because we have this desire and this need for more. If you guys will, say something with me this morning. Less is more on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Less is more. I heard a new one Wednesday night. I was talking to Jean Farrar, and Jean, one of her friends, put it this way: less is best. Isn't that awesome? But this is great. Less is more. And some of you are scratching your head and you're saying, Slate, that doesn't even make sense. How could less be more? I'll show you how. Less stuff many times means more time with family. I counsel people, are you with me? I counsel people who have so much stuff and they are so indebted to all the stuff that they have that the wife works 2 or 3 jobs and the husband works 2 or 3 jobs to try and pay for all the stuff that they have, and their marriage is a train wreck. Guess what? Because they don't ever see each other. They're just trying to pay for the stuff. And so less many times means more time with your family. Many times it means more experiences, right? We have less stuff, we've got more money, so we can do more. But at the least, right, it means more peace. Less stuff means more peace. What do we do when we buy a house? Well, I got to take out insurance. And what do we do with all the stuff in our house? Well, I got to have a security system, and I got to have more insurance to cover all the stuff because we're stressed out. We're worried about our stuff, all the stuff that we have. We've got to do stuff to protect the stuff that we have. But at the very least, it's more peace. Peace because I don't have the stress of those high payments and all of those bills and wondering how I'm going to pay for it and how many jobs I'm going to have to get to keep up with those payments. You know, it all boils down to really 2 scriptures, Ecclesiastes 4 verse 6, where wise Solomon says, I say it is better to be what, church? Content with what? Little you have. Otherwise, you will always be struggling for what? More, and that's like chasing the wind. You get that, right? You ever try to catch wind in your hand? Try and do that sometimes. It's impossible, and that's what happens when we try and satisfy ourselves with more stuff. And I've done that, man. I have thought, if I could just get that, if I could just buy that, this is going to make me happy and I'm going to be so satisfied. And I get it, and then the bills come in. I'm like, wow, that's not what I really thought it was. Philippians 4, 11 through 13, Paul says, not that I speak in regard to need, for I've learned in whatever state I am to be what, church? Content. I know how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. Now I want you to notice what this passage teaches us. Contentment has nothing to do with how much we have. Right? And that's what Jesus was telling us back in Luke chapter 12 verse 15. He says life does not consist in the abundance of the things that we possess. In other words, life is not about how much stuff we can have, because it's not going to satisfy. And so he says learn to be content. And he says here's where I found my contentment, Jesus. And the reason I can have this continual joy and the reason I can be content all the time is because I put my trust in something that never changes, it never fluctuates, and that's a relationship with Jesus. And we can have that. Jesus is enough. All right, well, I'm going to really go quick on these next 2 points, but number 2, we need understanding. Hosea chapter 4 verse 6 says, my people are destroyed for a lack of what, church? Now I'm going to use this verse very loosely, okay? But I definitely believe that we could use this when it comes to our finances, because people are hurt financially many times because they don't have a working understanding of how to handle their finances. For example, in our culture today, and y'all tell me if this is true or not, in our culture today, when people go to buy something, they just want to know 2 things. First of all, how much have they got to put down, and how much is it going to cost a month? Y'all agree? But they never ask the question, how much is it really going to cost me? Now, it will cost you, or could cost you, in a lot of ways, but I'm going to put up a scenario here. Let's go back to that $16,000 in credit card debt. The average American, right? Some have a lot more, some have none. Some have a lot less. But the average American, let's say $16,000 credit card debt, you pay $250 a month toward that at 19% interest for 40 years, because you can't pay for that, okay, at $250. Right? Under 40 years. So at 40 years, guess what? $250 a month on that $16,000. Here's the interest you'd pay. Over $100,000 in interest. Do the math. Now, some of you, your jaw drops, but listen, this is where we get understanding. Are you with me? Answer the question, is that a good deal? Well, I got to have it now, so I'm going to put $16,000 on my credit card, but it's going to cost me $160,000 because I couldn't be patient enough to save and to wait. Listen, this is understanding. That's one of the things I want my kids to know. My kids, they know before they graduate school, they have to go through Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. Lena and Liesl have both been through it already. Liesl she really got me excited because, man, as she was going through it, she was just like, wow, this is crazy. This is absolutely amazing. I had no understanding and I had no idea. And that's what happens when we gain understanding, right? And we need understanding when it comes to this area of our lives because it can train wreck our lives. It can train wreck our family. So I want to encourage you to seek out more understanding. In fact, there are a lot of guys out here, okay? There are a lot of guys who've written about how to handle your money. I am a big advocate of Dave Ramsey. And Dave Ramsey, as I said, does the Financial Peace University. I have a copy of the Financial Peace book. It is my own personal copy. The first person who comes to me this morning and says, I want that book, I will read that book, I will give it to you this morning. And all I ask that you do is read it, and when you get done with it, bless someone else with it. Because as you get into these things, as you begin to pursue understanding in these areas, let me tell you, it will absolutely bless your lives. Lastly, we want to plan. We want to plan. That's so important to plan. Proverbs 21 verse 5 says, the plans of the diligent leads to profit as surely as what, church? Haste leads to what? Poverty. In other words, when we have a plan, then we're going to get ahead. When we have a plan, it's going to be better for us. We're going to prosper. But when we do things in haste, and some of you may be asking the question, well, what do you mean by haste? Well, by definition, it means excessive speed or urgency of movement or action to hurry. And that's where people get into trouble financially, is because they're making these impulsive buying decisions. Oh, I got to have that. And they don't think about it. They just buy it. They don't have a plan. They don't even pray about it. Pray about it before you buy something. James chapter 1 verse 5, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God and He'll give it to you. He'll give it to you liberally. He wants you to have knowledge. And so before you make a big purchase, pray about it. Take some time. How is this going to affect me? How is it going to affect my family financially? But have a plan. Because here's the thing. You can hastily fall into debt, but you can't hastily fall out of debt. You can stumble into debt, but you can't stumble out of debt. You can mistake your way into debt, but you can't mistake your way out of debt. It's going to take a plan. And so I want to encourage you at least to find someone maybe like Dave Ramsey. I'll just share with you as we close out some of the things that he will teach you through the Financial Peace University. He's going to help you come up with a plan. One of the things he's going to tell you to do is do a budget. Come up with a plan for your family. Write down your income and then write down all your expenses. Some of them you'll have to guesstimate on, such as the electric bill and the water bill. And then you come down here and you start working the math and you see how much is going out compared to how much is going in. And then you have to learn to balance that and to put a portion of that away so that you can save and live below your means. Something else that he's going to tell you to do. And it's kind of ironically, Kayla and Seth were talking to me about this yesterday. They asked me about Dave Ramsey and they said, what do you think about his $1,000 emergency fund? I told him, man, I am all about that. Dave Ramsey is going to tell you as quickly as you can, get $1,000 into savings, okay? If you got to sell things, if you got to take a second job for a while just to get $1,000 into savings, because here's the deal, eventually Murphy's Law is going to kick in. You know what Murphy's Law is? Shake your head. Anything bad that can happen will happen. Those of you who have owned a house, you know that this is true. The washer, the dryer, maybe they go out at the same time. The tires in your car go flat. The air conditioner goes. Something is going to happen. And if you don't have that emergency fund set aside, what people do is they take out a credit card, and that's where it begins. And they put it on credit. And so he's teaching you not to use credit, to pay cash, but you got to save to pay cash, and then you can take care of that without dealing with those things. And he's going to talk to you about how to get out of debt. Well, I'm out of time. I'm not going to take up any more of our lesson today, but I want to encourage you. I want to encourage you not only to live a life free from financial bondage, but to live a life in a way that you handle the finances that God has entrusted you with in a way that is pleasing to God. Because we're just simply stewards. We don't own any of this stuff. It all belongs to God, and He's given us this stuff to do His will. And so I want to encourage you to pray about this. I'm telling you, it will bless your life. But let's pray. God, we just thank you so much for all that you do in our lives. Father, there may be some here today that are struggling financially. And Father, I pray that you will help them to break free from that financial bondage. Father, there may be some who have just given in to the desire of wanting more and more and trying to find fulfillment there. And God, I pray that you will just release them and free them from that as well and help them to truly find fulfillment in Jesus. But God, we know that you have a will and a perfect plan for our lives. And Father, we pray that we'll live by that, that when people look at us, that they will see you. And so, Father, we just pray all these things in the power of Jesus' name. Amen. At this time, the invitation is yours. If you have a need, whether it's to come to Jesus today, or whether you are a Christian and maybe there's something that you need prayers about, we'd love to pray for you. We have a prayer room in the back where one of our elders or even myself can meet you if it's more of a private matter. But if you have a need, won't you come? Together we stand and as we sing.